73% of all people are aliens. That's a fact.
Cut! Cut! All right, let's talk movies.
Yes.
So, what is your favorite book to film, boys?
My favorite book to film is probably Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk.
Nice.
Yeah, I
Wait.
loved the book, read the book, and obviously watched the film. It was actually quite strange, actually, because most people have seen the film before they read the book. But I actually read the book before I saw the film. So I enjoyed both immensely. So I'd say that was probably my favorite book to film.
There's a couple. There's a lot of classic films from books. I mean, Stephen King has many films, instant movie classics that are book to film. Obviously, you got It. I don't know. Misery was fantastic. The Shining was another absolutely amazing film. One I really liked that not a lot of people realized was a book to film was, I think, Trainspotting.
Okay.
I think that's a great British film, just the way it was sort of brought to life by the director, because the characters, you write in a book that the characters are sort of these
Like poverty.
the people of the street almost, and they abuse like alcohol and drugs and all this sort of stuff, but to bring it to life like they did in the film, from the descriptions in the book, I think was really well done. So I think for me, in terms of creation, I think for me, Trainspotting, I'd pick off that list.
Trainspotting.
Yeah.
I've actually never seen that movie. It's been sitting on my to-watch list for a very long time.
Yeah.
I'd love to see an American try and read Trainspotting.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? Maybe that can be a challenge for me.
Yeah, get a page of Trainspotting and get you to read it. That'd be amazing.
Well, maybe I will have to impress you then.
That could be a good segment on this show,
It definitely could.
the American British crossover and the translations, and especially with a book like Trainspotting with Scottish, for example, it's not an easy one to grasp for the best of times.
No, it's one of those books that when you start it, you think, oh my God, like, how am I going to read this? But then after a few chapters, you kind of become familiar with everything and how things are being written in the book.
Yeah.
So then it becomes a lot easier to understand, but it's mind-blowing at first.
Because it's a very dark story, really, isn't it?
Oh, I think all of Irvine Welsh's books are really dark. Talking about book to film adaptations, he did Filth with James McAvoy. Did you see that?
I have seen that. Yeah, I didn't realize that was him.
Yeah, that was another Irvine Welsh book film, and that was really good and quite dark as well.
Yeah, I'll have to check that out again.
Definitely.
We can't ignore 50 Shades of Grey, for example, for book to film, because in Britain that is now the all-time best-selling book ever, which is bonkers. And I think you mentioned this before, Chris, that 50 Shades was actually a self-published novel as well, which is fantastic for people like us who want to dream big, because everyone wants to get the big time with their stories. I mean, for me, my dream for my book series Deep is the big screen, or at least a screen. So TV series or movie would be amazing. But 50 Shades jumped onto the big screen and worldwide actually made $571 million, and it would took $40 million to make. So that is a massive, massive profit margin.
It sure is. And did you both know how 50 Shades of Grey actually got started?
I don't. Go on.
I've heard. Was it she writing Twilight fan fiction?
Yes. So 50 Shades of Grey was actually a fan fiction from Twilight by Stephanie Myers. And most of the fans that came to 50 Shades of Grey were already Twilight fans. and it was just more like, Twilight was like vampire, glittery, whatever. And so they wanted to see more or read more about like this dirty vampire. And so that's how they got into 50 Shades of Grey.
I never knew that.
Yeah, it was quite interesting because like when I first saw 50 Shades of Grey, I was like, wait, this looks like Twilight. So I started researching it, and it was like, yeah, this is just a corporate version of Twilight.
Wow. I've never seen Twilight. I'm not sure how many people say that, but I'm in that category, and I'm not sure if I have the right impression of what Twilight is after that conversation.
Well,
I think
it's
Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey, they are. I have this running joke all the time with my girlfriend. I want my book to end up in a charity shop, because if you go into any charity shop in the UK, you'll be able to find a copy of either one of the Dan Brown books or one of the 50 Shades of Grey books. And that, to me, is a sign that you've made it. If people are giving away your book to a charity shop, you've sold enough copies, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So,
well,
pinnacle.
the whole like Twilight thing, I accidentally went to the town, and okay, it's a crazier story than just that, right? So one day I woke up and I had this like inkling feeling to just go find waterfalls. I do things like that, like crazy stuff like that. And so I told my husband, let's gather some friends and we're going to go find some waterfalls. And so he says, fine. We took a map and I started searching waterfalls in Washington State, and we drove out there and we found like a few, but then we ended up in this small town, La Push. And when we went there, there was a little bar that says vampires over here and werewolves over here. And I looked at it and said, okay, this must be some sort of Twilight town. Yes, it was. That was where they filmed the movie Twilight.
That's impressive.
Yeah. That just reminded me of the song by TLC, that Don't Go Chasing Waterfalls.
Yeah. I played that whole song all the way down there. Yeah. It was interesting. I need to post some of that picture on Twitter, and you guys can see how awesome that town looks. It's like all of the mountains were in the sea, while the beach is like littered with like dead squids and everything.
Wow.
Yeah. It was very vampire-ish.
There's
I think
there's one place I'd like to go and see off a TV set. Well, there's numerous in this series, but Game of Thrones was another book to screen creation, and King's Landing was in Croatia. One of my friends recently went there, and they talked about how amazing it is there. But they're all over the place. They filmed in Spain, Ireland, Iceland. They went everywhere. But there's a couple of absolutely fascinating places that they filmed in that actually look like that in reality.
Okay.
I was going to say, I think book to film is obviously a great idea, and it's kind of like a dream for a lot of authors to get to that point. But like Stephen King, for example, he apparently hated the film version of The Shining because it changed the whole meaning of his book. I just wondered how you felt about that. Like, say somebody did take your book on board, but they wanted to change the ending or something. How would you feel about that?
See, that would actually hurt my feelings. Like, if I had like an image of how this book is supposed to be already, and if it was portrayed like differently, it would kind of throw me off. It would probably upset me, and not a lot of things upset me, and I don't think anybody wants to see me go that route.
No, because with Stephen King, Jack Torrance, he actually, in the book, he saves Danny by sacrificing himself, but obviously in the film he doesn't do that. Because in the book he chains himself to the boiler, so he stays there and he can't physically get away, and it gives it time for Danny to get away. But obviously in the film it's just that weird chasing him through a garden and then dying in the cold scene.
Spoilers.
Yeah, bro.
If you haven't seen it already, it's your own fault.
Yeah, that's true. It's been around for a while.
Do you know what?
Who do you have in your book, Chris, because obviously I've read your book, and I'll let you get back to the question that I originally posed in a minute about the changing of it.
Okay.
Because obviously, I think if they changed yours, it'd be quite significant.
Yeah.
But who would you have as in
this
the cast?
this is something we talked about before, just chit chatting, and it's kind of a good thing because like you have got to dream big about your books, and I visioned this as a film before because it's ultimately what my dream for the book is. But I'm definitely going to answer that question about the ending because I think there's a lot of factors in that, whether that would upset me or not. But I've got a few. So for my main character, Daisy, she's very much she was brought up in the woods and sort of not, she was neglected, I guess, but in a love sense. So she's very sort of self managed, and she sort of lives, looks after herself and goes out hunting, and she learns all the military stuff when she's younger before she goes out into the big world. But I think of being a Walking Dead fan, Catalin Nacon, she plays one of the characters. She's great. She's a good age for the character, and I think she play it very well. And Paige, who's one of the stronger characters in my book, who kind of overlooks Daisy. She's sort of, I guess, like a role model for her. Weirdly, I hadn't had an actor in mind for her until I started watching the Bulletproof series, which we're going to talk about later on. Christina Chong in that first series, I think, would be a fantastic Paige. She's very sort of down to earth, gritty, and would be that sort of action character when needed. And I'm guessing there's two other characters I need to talk about, because if you've read the book like yourself, you'll know Eli plays a big part in that story, and definitely does in book 2, by the way. So you'll definitely enjoy that one, Chris, when you get onto it.
Yeah, I really liked Eli in the first
Yeah.
one. Especially the bit of it. Obviously, I'm not going to spoil it, but the twist elements with Eli were brilliant.
Yeah, you keep reading on, mate. You keep reading. So for him, there was two that I want to get involved. On a magical carpet ride, this would be. But Timothy Oliphant, who played Santa Clarita Diet, he was in that, and he's been in other films I've seen. I think he's a great actor. He would be good for that, and he could bring a darker side to it when needed. But also, if we're hitting the jackpot with actors here, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, Negan himself, would be a fantastic Batman, sort of overlooking father figure as well. And the last one I got to mention, because this character can't be unmentioned. We can't forget about him in the book. Max, he's the all-American action hero who sort of kind of saves the day, but you know what happens with him. No spoilers.
No spoilers.
Sam Worthington, Clash of the Titans, many of the films. I think he'd be a great figure, and be able to pull that off.
Yeah, he's brilliant. He's great in Avatar.
Exactly. So I think he would be a great Max. And just to answer the question as well about how the ending changed would affect me, I think it all depends on how it affects the characters' arcs. Because if the ending was to change the story slightly, but the characters were still true to themselves, I think I'd be okay with it. But if they changed what the characters represented as well, I think that was where I'd get a bit like, okay, I need to reevaluate what this is, whether I like it or not. But I wouldn't be too downhearted about it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Death to Screenberg. Yeah.
I love that title.
Yeah, I was a bit nervous and apprehensive about that title, but my main character, Jack, he's very much he's got a lot of his own issues in terms of I've kind of normalized the role of a Grim Reaper. So his job in the book is to collect people's souls, basically, and speak to them about their lives. So he has a hard time in terms of he's constantly meeting people that have really bad problems in their lives, and it does take its toll on him. Makes him a bit alcohol dependent, and he's a bit of a sex addict as well at the start of the book, because he's just looking for that sort of release and that escapism. So I think, looking at characters, I thought Tom Hardy would be, if we're thinking of dream actors, Tom Hardy would be my number one that I'm thinking. He would be amazing.
Plays a dark character well as well.
Yeah, he does. He's got that dark side to him, but he's also really charismatic, which I think what I tried to do with Jack. But again, like yourself watching Bulletproof recently, I think Ashley Walters, who plays Pike in Bulletproof, I think he'd be brilliant because I've seen him in other stuff. I've watched him in a version of Romeo and Juliet, like a modern version where he played Romeo, and he was really good in that as well. So I think he's got that in his locker. He's got the emotional side, but also the sort of like witty banter that Jack would need as well. I think with Tiffany, because she's quite fun-loving and quite just quite down to earth, like you said, I think Michelle Keegan for me would be probably one, because she's a really good actor, and Tiffany does have some scenes in the book where you think you have to feel for her a little bit, and I think she's an actress that could do both. And then I can't remember the name, but I know his face. Have you seen Preacher on Amazon, or have you seen Brassic on Sky?
No, don't ring a bell.
No.
That's going to kill me. His name's John, but I can't remember his surname. But he's a fantastic actor, and I'd love him to play it. I've got like a really sinister sort of like evil character in my book called the Bowler Hat Man. And I can kind of see him playing it because in the roles I've seen him before, he's covered in tattoos. He plays a drug addict really well, and I think he plays that evil character really well as well. I can't remember his surname; it's going to kill me. But they would be my dream cast from what I could see.
You said the movie Creature?
No, Preacher.
Oh, Preacher.
It's got Dominic Cooper, and it's on Amazon. It's a series, and he plays Cassidy in Preacher, but I can't remember the actor's surname.
Cooper?
No, Dominic Cooper's the main guy, but he plays.
Let's see. I'm pulling up Preacher right now, and I got Joseph Gilgun, Ruth Negga, Dominic Cooper. I'm definitely sure it's not Ruth Negga.
No, because she's the actress. It must be the first one, Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's if you click on him? What else has he been in?
Let me see. Well, it doesn't have a Joseph on here. Oh wait, that's screenwriting. Okay, Joseph Gilgun played as Cassidy in the show.
Yeah, that's it, Joseph Gilgun.
Yeah. Okay.
I very much doubt I'm going to be able to get him after saying his name wrong, but he'd be a brilliant choice. He's great in everything that he's been in. So.
Well, no, it's like I think it's not that bad. Like especially when you're just so used to hearing their name as their character, and sometimes like you kind of picture just that person as the character, and you just forget their actual name. And then when you finally see it, you're like, oh wait, yeah, that's him. And because most times when people see certain actors, they always go by the name that they remembered. So it's like it's kind of weird because I think that actually happens with a lot of stars, such as what's his name, the guy that played in Third Rock, and then he ended up being Robin from in Batman, the latest one. Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Oh, Joseph Gordon-Levitt.
Yeah, Levitt. A lot of people always call him by his name from 30 Rocks, Third Rock from the Sun. So it's just like I think the name was still the same or something, but yeah. And then when people are like Jordan, or Joseph, and they're like, "Who's that?" You're so used to them being a certain character for a very long time that you just don't remember their actor's name. Their real name.
It's funny what you're saying, Sol, about how characters get, the audience gets so sucked into the character persona that they forget when they meet them in real life, that they're actual people behind the scene. And I always go back to this one when I talk about this sort of thing. But again, I'm talking about The Walking Dead. I do apologize. I love the show. But Andrew Lincoln is a great actor in The Walking Dead, obviously with an American voice, but in real life is very English. And people are always quite shocked if they don't know him from anything else or go back to his old films like Love Actually, those sort of things in the past with his Britishness comes out, and they hear him speak for the first time. They're quite taken back.
Yeah.
Well, it also
Yeah.
goes the opposite direction too. Like if somebody is very used to the actors being who they are, like with, Twitter being so popular and everything, and majority of celebrities are on Twitter being very active, they would normally always, like remember them as the actors, and they're like, "Oh, wait, I know him in this movie, but I don't know his name in there. I just know him as this guy." Like for example, Ricky Gervais.
Yeah.
I don't know any of his character's name. Every time I watch his movie, I'm like, Ricky. But I love that guy. He's so funny.
I think also another one quite similar was Sons of Anarchy. Charlie
Ah,
Hunnam. Again, a very American accent in the show all the way through, very cool. And then he comes back when he's interviewed, very British accent. I think is he Scouse from Liverpool? Yeah.
Yeah, I think James McAvoy is another one because obviously he's been a lot like X-Men and
Yeah.
stuff like that recently. He's got a very thick Scottish accent as well. Yeah, sometimes they have to buy the rights, don't they? Like, even if they're not going to use any of it, like even if it's just a name or the vague idea, they still have to pay for the rights. I don't understand that when they do that. Like, I think Jaws and Jurassic Park, they were both
mhm.
books that were turned into films as well. And I think Jaws is very similar to World War Z or World War Z, in the fact that they didn't actually use a great deal of the book.
Mm. So if we're talking film, then if we round it up a bit, we don't have to look at book to film, but film sense, what's your favorite film, all-time favorite film, or top three?
Well, my top three, I would have to say my very first one will be Heathers. I don't know if you're familiar with the movie Heathers,
No.
not the TV series, but the movie Heathers is like a 1980s cult film. Is like teenage angst, and it is actually one of my very favorite. I actually know the word for everything in that movie, and so my second one would be How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days. That movie is so great. You both need to watch it.
I've seen that film. I know that film. Heath Ledger, great again in that film.
No, actually, it was
Yeah.
what's his name? The all right guy, Matthew
Oh,
McConaughey. Yeah,
okay. I'm thinking of the wrong film.
yeah. It's
Oh,
you're
yeah,
you're
I
you're
was as
thinking
well,
of
actually.
wait, it's the one with the other chick.
Things I
Yeah,
Hate
that's
About
the
You.
one. That's the one. I love
What
that.
film did you say?
How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days.
Okay. Yes, I have seen that as well.
Yeah,
Yes.
that is a really great
Yeah.
film, and I love it. I'm a slapstick comedy kind of person, and I love like rom-coms that are like worth the watch. But my third one would be Legally Blonde. I don't know if you're familiar with that movie, but that's one of the best movies.
Yeah, I've seen that too.
Yeah, that's me.
Nice. Go on then, Chris. What have you got?
I think that's a great film, and it's the first film I remember watching sort of like in my teens and thinking, whoa, like film can be actually very different. Doesn't have to be all glamorous and Hollywood and
Mhm.
stuff like that. So yeah, I'll say
Yeah, I
20
love
days later.
that film. And actually, my boys, they're 16-year-old twins, and we went through. I liked them enough, so they sat down and watched it with me. But we watched back to back 28 days later, and then 28 weeks later. I just had to get it out of my system. So you have to watch this film. So they sat through that the other day as well.
I'm going to have to say Fight Club is one of the three, just because I thought it was a brilliant film. Pulp Fiction
Yeah.
from Quentin Tarantino. When I was a projectionist at the Odeon, we used to have our favourite film on our badges. So instead of names, they would just identify us by our favourite film. And Pulp Fiction was the film that I opted for that, so that'd have to go on there. And then I'm going to probably pick something different, and I'm going to go with something British and say
Nice.
28 days
Oh, I
later.
thought that.
Go on. I'd say my top. I don't know if I can put three together, but definitely Aliens. The sequel to Alien. Alien is very fantastic in its own right, and I love the suspense in that film. I like a film where the imagination lets you run away with it a bit, and that ticked the box. But I loved as a young teenager myself, watching Hicks, Apone, and all those guys rocking up with their big weapons and driving into hell. Basically, that was fantastic for me. And Platoon, again, an 80s film. about the Vietnam War. I absolutely love that film. That's the type of film that I can quote every single word to as well. And there's just plenty of others I could probably put in a third place, but I can't think of them right now, so I'm not going to play it safe.
We're going to leave that part open.
Yeah.
Just going to add like maybe, Wedding Crasher in there or something,
Oh,
right?
I love Wedding Crashers. It's a great film.
Me too. I love that movie, especially the moose part. Oh my God.
I like the guys when he keeps painting Vince Vaughn and he gives him the painting, and I think that's brilliant.
It's like there was I forgot what it was. Somebody had asked me if I were to pick a celebrity to star in a role with that would actually compliment me, who would it be? And I said Vince Vaughn.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah, we have similar personalities, so I'm just like, yeah, Vince Vaughn is going to be my soul, my kindred spirit if I ever become an actor.
So that's what an actor that play alongside you.
Yes.
That's a good question. Have you got an answer, Chris?
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, I'm gonna go with John Hamm from
nice.
Mad Men. I just think he's amazing as Don Draper, and I'd just love to be in anything with him. I'd be in a commercial for I don't know, foot cream if it meant to be with John Hamm.
What cream it is?
I'm going to have to mention someone that you mentioned earlier, just for his versatility and just the amount of films that he's been in that I thought, yes, and what a good character. Tom Hardy. I think he's just done so many good things that I think, he'd steer me in the right direction. Or have a good bar fight, or a good drink with, I don't know.
Yeah,
I have
you seen him in Taboo? Tom Hardy. Yeah, he's brilliant. I just think he's one of those actors where if he got hold of your book or your script and he was associated with it, you couldn't help but be over the moon and really.
Do you know what? Actually, I'll stick this film in my third place just because it's we're talking about him and he's in it, and it's Lawless. And I think that is an absolute classic Guy Ritchie film.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Rock and Roll is a really good one as well. Some really good actors in those as well. Brill, good. What about TV shows then? If we had to pick a TV show, because obviously we've got Goggins coming on, who's the director of Bulletproof, season 2 currently at the moment. So, what would be your all-time favorite TV show?
That's a tough question. Do you know what? I'm going to have to go with it because I've been watching this since day one. Literally, the very first episode aired, and I sat there and watched it. And I'm still going with it. So Walking Dead for me is, I'm watching all the spin-offs and I'm still loving the show. So, it's 10 years on. How can I say that's not my all-time favorite show? So that's mine.
That's true. I mean, you talk about it all the time. So I guarantee that's your favorite show.
I even mention it in my book. So it's, it's.
You do, actually. I remember that.
Yeah.
Daisy had comic books, didn't she? And she only had 2. And one of them was The Walking Dead, I think. Or they might have both been The Walking Dead, but she
reflected her story being similar to Rick Grimes and Carl. And, just the fact that they're out living for themselves, basically. Yeah.
What about you, Sol?
I am a big Supernatural fan. I can sit there and rewatch Supernatural all over again, and it's been 15 seasons already.
I have never seen that show.
Oh my God, you need to jump on it. It is the best show. You will love it. If you love zombies and supernatural stuff and vampires and werewolves and things of that nature, Supernatural is definitely going to catch your attention.
I will check that out.
Yeah, and the thing is, you see how what we have right now is this chemistry? All the actors in that show has the same chemistry, which makes people want to see more of it. And even if the show, like there might be like some boring episodes, and all of us knows, like, okay, one season would be like really bad, and then the next season would be really good. But it's just the chemistry between all of these guys that are in there that makes the show really great. And that's what we really followed it for, is the actors. And it's just like they live the moment of Supernatural and they live the moment outside of Supernatural as well, too. But yeah, I mean, they just postponed the last season. So what I heard was, since they had enough episodes left because of the whole coronavirus thing, they're going to start another season and end it from there. This is actually supposed to be the last season.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So you got 16 years to follow.
It's really interesting with this virus because
Wow.
there was a lot of shows due to be launched around now, moving into summertime as well. But they've all been pushed back and production stopped. Your classic things like EastEnders and Coronation Street, which have been going for decades in Britain and religiously played, are now not playing, maybe twice a week. So it's, TV is suffering at the moment.
I think it'd be really interesting as well what happens going forward because, like, for example, I watched The Invisible Man last night with my girlfriend that was obviously due to be released at the cinema this week. And I just thought, this is really actually interesting for us because we don't get a chance to go to the cinema that often because we've got quite busy jobs and we've got a little boy. So getting someone to look after him can be a bit of a nightmare sometimes. But we could still watch the film as like the day it came out, which I thought Sky or any of the streaming channels might actually get onto that because how much money must they be making from people being
I'm quite sure I've seen that on
right?
Netflix recently as well, Netflix possibly and maybe Sky. Someone definitely advertised that you can watch it the same day as it's in the cinema, so perhaps they already are doing that. I'm not sure.
You both definitely need to step up to Supernatural because I actually posted up on, like, a friend of mine who's a Twitch streamer. He was wondering what show he should watch next, and I told him to watch Supernatural. And just a few weeks ago, I asked him, "How did you like it?" He's on the 5th season right now, and he's like, "Yes, it's getting really good." It's just like it jumps from urban legends because that's what it is. These two boys, they're hunters, so their families are hunters, and they hunt the supernatural. Like anything that pops out, spooks in the darks and stuff like that, from vampires to werewolves, and they hunt demons. So these demons come out and they chase after them. And these boys are actually very well-known hunters. So demons, technically are attracted to finding them. And they get to meet the Grim Reaper. They get to meet like angels and gods and stuff like that. But it's a wild twist and turn that you definitely have to get into because like the whole thing is like it's so biblical, but it turns the whole Bible around where it's just like, wait, who is actually the good guy here and who's the bad guy? Because they made it seem like the demons were like the best things and then the angels like the worst things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really decent. You both definitely need to jump on that
I'll
one.
check.
But you know what else is good that I forgot to bring up? Are you familiar with Black Mirror?
Oh yeah.
How do you like Black Mirror?
I some episodes are quite not quite to my tasting, but majority of them I love it.
Yeah, I think I'm the same.
Did you saw the movie version of it, the Bandersnatch?
I have not seen that.
Oh, it's actually an adaptation of what kind of book I like. So, have you both ever played one of those like adventure books?
No.
It's like an adventure book is like once you read to the end of the chapter, right? It gives you options. So it's like, do you want to turn on the light? Do you want to drive the car and stuff like that? So you get to pick and choose where you want to go, and that's what Bandersnatch is. It is on Netflix. I don't know if you guys actually have Netflix over there, but
yes, of course we do, man.
I don't know.
Come on.
It's on Netflix, right? And guess what? My dumbass did. I thought I was sitting there waiting for the movie to keep going, and I was wondering why it was pausing for like an hour, right? I didn't know that I had to pick an option for it to keep going, and I was like, oh my God. And it's like, this movie can go on forever if you keep picking the same options. But
I think it's really interesting that you've mentioned that because obviously we've got Goggins on the show. The Bulletproof boys have just done something.
Yeah, I did see their
tweets.
That, they were doing something with Zoom today, and I couldn't quite figure out what they were doing. But yeah, they've definitely been very interactive on Twitter, and I guess that could be a result of the situation we're in. I'm not sure. We'll have to ask him and make sure he lets us know.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if that's something that companies and TV shows will do more of in the future. Giving people choice.
Yeah, that would be awesome because that movie. I actually, it's supposed to be a 2-hour movie, as any movie, but I spent 12 hours on that movie. I was I was trying to like find all the endings because they said it was like 4 or 5, and I actually kept going back to watch it again and choose like a different ending, and each one was just like, oh my god, it was crazy. You definitely, I can't tell you the ending, no spoilers, because each and every one of them just makes you want to pull your hair out.
Check that out. It sounds good.
It is. Oh my god, I actually did a review on YouTube on that movie too. So
Awesome. All right, guys.
Yeah.
If you could let us know down in the chat when we hear this show, we'll be chatting along with you. Let us know what your favorite TV shows are, and definitely your top 3 movies, because that's always interesting. And if there's anything that we didn't mention, book to film, that is significant, something that actually, something massive that we clearly missed, just let us know, and we'll make sure we get that tweeted around. Yeah, let us know what you like.
Music for cats. Meow.
Hello writing community, welcome to the read and review section of the Writing Community Chat Show. Now, last week we asked you to be the most convincing if you wanted us to read your book live on the show, and again we were inundated with some fantastic responses. We found it really difficult to pick a book for the show this week, so much so that I actually ended up purchasing 4 books from the list of books that we were sent. So keep sending them in, they were brilliant, but we had to pick one. So this week for the show, we picked Anders Kingsley's The Secret of the Second Zeus. And let me start by saying just how fantastic this book is. If you haven't read it, you need to pick up a copy today because it's brilliant. It's a thriller, kind of in the vein of the Dan Brown, the Da Vinci Code. It reminded me of that quite a bit in the terms of that it was a page turner. Every single chapter, it's really frustrating when this happens, but fantastic at the same time. You can't put it down, it just makes you want to read on. Now, again, I'll talk a little bit of detail about what happens, but I don't want to spoil anything with this book because it's such a great experience to read it for yourself. So I think I highly recommend that you do that. But it's a thriller, and it's got a lot of humorous elements in this book. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure Anders won't mind me saying, but at the start of the book, one of the main characters, Tom, he finds himself in a predicament where he walks in on his 2 friends have just been murdered, and he needs to escape. Now, fortunately for Tom and for us, because obviously the story would end there, Tom does escape, and then it's about his journey throughout the book, and trying to solve the mystery as to why his friend Marco has been murdered, and he does that through the help of Sandra. So it's mainly Tom and Sandra throughout the whole book, but their relationship and their chemistry is brilliant, and again really funny. The end of the book, again I'm not going to spoil it for you, but God, I mean, I don't know if I love Anders or hate him, but it was a brilliant twist, and I don't think I'll ever read anything in the writing community as good as what I've just read. Now, that's me obviously going out on a whim, but I just, in terms of, if you want escapism at this moment in time and you want to get lost in a book, Anderson Kingsley's The Secret of the Second Zeus is a book for that. It's absolutely phenomenal. It's got that high pace, that high energy that you want from a book. It's also funny. It's got violence in it. It's dark in parts. It's hugely entertaining. I can see it definitely being a TV series or a show. The way it was structured and the way it was written was that it just, every chapter ended with you just wanting to know that little tiny bit more about what's happening. So it's perfectly paced for that. So I'd highly recommend it. If you haven't read it, get a copy of The Secret of the Second Zeus. It was brilliant, and I look forward to reading anything that Anders Kingsley brings out because he's a phenomenal writer. So, now that we've read his book, we need to read another one for next week's show. So, the thread is already on Twitter. If you want us to read your book on the show next week and give you a review on Goodreads and Amazon, just like we've done for Anders Kingsley this week, then send in your book to us again at the Writing Community Chat Show. However, the way we're going to pick the book for next week's show is the best book related GIF. So put the best book related gift in the thread. If we think that yours is the best, we will then purchase, read and review your book from that section. So good luck everybody. We look forward to having a mass of gifts to choose from. Have a great week. Okay, so this week's interview, everybody, from the Writing Community Chat Show is with a very special guest. He's the director of Bulletproof 2 that's currently showing on Sky. It's Diarmuid Goggins.
Hello.
Welcome, Diarmuid.
Beautifully pronounced, Chris. Beautifully pronounced. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, guys. Really great to be here.
Oh, you're welcome. We're very grateful to have you on.
You too. We've been looking forward to this all week.
Your name, by the way, we've been having a conversation about this for a long time. Is it pronounced Diarmuid?
Yeah, it's Dear. I say Diarmuid, so it's like I did a bit of work in America, and like the Americans couldn't get it at all. You know, they couldn't.
Yeah.
So I used to tell them it was like pyramid with a D. So it's like you know, but then most of them used to call me the pyramid because I was like, no, you dropped the pyramid part of it. So it's like Diarmuid. I say Diarmuid. So it's like deer and mud. So Diarmuid.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Diarmuid. Yeah. Brilliant. Because I'm not going to lie, I YouTubed it and there was different ways of pronouncing it. And I thought, oh no, because I'm terrible with pronunciation of people's names anyway. So I thought, God, if I get it wrong, it's nice. So embarrassing.
It's nice to bring it up because it is like it's not a very common. I mean, it's a pretty common name in Ireland, but it's not a very common name internationally. And it's amazing the amount of people that UK or internationally as well. And so the amount of people that don't even they kind of cough when they go to mention my name just as a way to try and get around it. You know, they kind of go, so tell me, what did you think of? And you're like, really? You really tried to cough over my name there so you couldn't pronounce it? I mean, you know, I'm not stupid. So it's quite funny. So thanks. It's good to bring it up, you know.
And also, yeah, definitely catching up with the show, by the way. Still catching up, so no spoilers for me, okay? I'm trying my best.
Fair enough. That's okay. No spoilers.
But Chris too. That's another thing you have to deal with. We both called Chris, so you're gonna have to try and work that one out. We haven't come up with a logo for ourselves yet, but Chris too has definitely seen it all, and he kept nagging me to get onto it because I've got a lot of shows on the back burner, and it's not because I don't want to watch them. It's been on my list for a long time. It's just we've been very busy with this show, so it was a great excuse for me to actually put that at the forefront of my viewing options and get into it. And to be fair, I've absolutely loved it.
Oh, great! It's so nice to hear. I mean, it's gone down really well, you know. I mean, I think it's come out at a really good time. There's been this kind of global pandemic. I'm not sure if you're aware of it. I suppose it came out at a really good time, and that the timing of it pretty much hit as people were about to go into lockdown, which, you know, I hate to say there's anything good about this lockdown, but that was good in that instance. So it was good for it to come out at that time. And I think it had a lot of good support after the first series. A lot of people were really interested and keen, and after the first series, there was a bit of a lull, a bit of a break between the first and second series. So it was good timing for it to come back out again, and it's got a lot of love. It's different, you know. I think what I like about it is that it's different. It's not what you necessarily expect to see on TV a lot. It's pure entertainment, and it doesn't make any excuses for the fact that that's what it is. You know, it hasn't got a huge amount of depth to it, and I mean that in the best possible way. It's pretty much pure entertainment, and you know, you can sit down, in some ways turn off your brain a little bit and just enjoy it. And I think that's, you know, I used to love that about television and films of the old days, and it's kind of gone a little bit by the wayside. So it's great to be involved with something like that, I think.
Yeah, it definitely feels from a viewer's perspective. I mean, season 1, obviously, and season 2, it feels like there's been a step up in terms of just the way it's the cinematic view of it and stuff. I feel like the shots are better, the camera angles are just better, the characters, I feel like the narratives are coming across a little bit more. Is that something that you consciously worked on before you started filming?
Yeah, big time. I mean, well spotted, and thank you. Yeah, I mean, I obviously wasn't involved in the first season, and I thought the third season was really, really good. But when I was approached to the second season, one of the things you're asked as a director when you get on board is, I suppose what you liked about the first season and what you didn't like. And I thought the rapport, the relationship between the two guys is probably the magic of the show for me. It's kind of what the heart of the show is. And it's really what you kind of want more and more of. And the action is somewhat secondary. I mean, it's great. It's, everyone likes a bit of action. Well, not everybody, but it's good. But really the heart of it is the kind of humor that these guys have and that relationship, that kind of love-in that they have for each other. And I think with a show, that's what kind of attracts you to it, the warmth. And I think that's what I loved about it. And maybe what I didn't love so much about it is I felt that it lacked a little bit of cinematic quality. And that's something that I would pride myself on, and something that I kind of spend a lot of time trying to better myself at, which is trying to be a better filmmaker and a better cinema maker. And that's one of the things I wanted to do, was kind of make it more cinematic, both in the approach to its action, but also in its overall storytelling. And I think one of the things I was really, really keen to do was to try and do the action in kind of less cuts. And, everybody can kind of do action, and action's been done a huge amount. And I was trying to do stunts that felt more real. And I think that probably came from a little bit of the Tom Cruise Mission Impossible thing, where, the notion of jumping out of a plane and doing that for real is amazing to watch. And we couldn't do that level, but I wanted to try and do was make it feel like that the guys were doing more driving, that the guys were doing more jumping, and that they were kind of more involved. And in a way, the audience becomes so much cleverer at figuring out when you're cutting to that stunt double, or when you're cutting away from the fact that the actor isn't doing the stunt. I tried to work on that as much as possible. And it was one of the things, I suppose, why I got the job. Both the guys, Ash and Noel, and the producers really, really wanted to embrace that and bring it up a level.
Yeah, I definitely saw that myself in the second series. The action, the characters much more involved. And I definitely back what you're saying about Noel Clarke and Ashley Walters. Their characters' chemistry is fantastic. But also in season 2, I love, I think, David Elliott and Jason Mazza. I think the two characters, is it Tim and Chris? I love how they try to replicate the two main characters' chemistry in the show, and it's quite a comic side of it. I really like how that plays out.
Yeah, it's a funny one because, there is no doubting who the stars of this show are. I mean, it's Noel and Ash's show, and they created it. They're the stars. They write it. They write episodes of it. So it's kind of their show, and like everyone loves the fact that it's their show. But then there is a team around them, and the team of people that work for them are in their own right, really good actors and want a little bit of depth to their roles and to their parts and to their characters. And some of that is written and some of it is not. And in particular, Chris, Jason Mazza and David Elliott were kind of really, really keen to try and do as much of their relationship and get as much of that across on screen, that they had this thing going too, and that, and a lot of the stuff that is actually on screen, particularly in the first 3 episodes, a lot of it wasn't actually kind of scripted. It was stuff that we kind of worked, we found kind of on the floor, or we spoke about beforehand, which was just like these little kind of nuggets I used to tell them of, like, it just give you so much insight into character, and I think what I love about character analysis is that, something, when you know somebody really, really well, you develop a shorthand. You do things that you just don't do with people you don't know less well, and it's them that make infer that that character is strong and that people know each other and their friendship is there, and so we try to work on them little moments and get them in there. The difficulty sometimes can be is that in a TV show like this, or in any TV show, the plot has to make sense, like the plot has to drive the story. And if you start cutting out plot and the story doesn't make sense, you obviously lose the audience. So actually the difficulty sometimes is that you kind of have all these lovely little character moments, and you get to the edit and you start to realize that, you're running slightly over time and that stuff has to go. And the balance is trying to lose, enough plot that you don't completely lose the audience and the story side of things, and you keep enough of that heart and that emotion and that character. And that's a real juggling act, and something that I was really, really keen to kind of keep some of them. So we lost little bits of plot, and we added little kind of ADR lines of dialogue to try and build a plot to keep the character stuff. So it was really, really tricky, but I'm so glad that we kept it. And I'm so glad that people notice it, because they do and they love it, you know?
Yeah, I think what's really noticeable about your directing career is that obviously you're coming into shows that are pre-existing and that are already there, with the Silent Witness and the stuff. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you've done stuff on Hollyoaks and Casualty as well. And what I can really tell from watching the stuff that you've directed is that character and storytelling and narration is really clear and really strong. Is that something that you look at in particular, and something that you pride yourself on as a director?
I mean, I think I came from a documentary background. So I did film school in Dublin many years ago, and I kind of ended up going into getting into documentary world, and so that was very kind of unscripted world. And so you kind of a lot of documentary is kind of finding the story kind of as you go, in a way. You know, you start out with an essence of what you think you're going to do, and it develops over time of meeting the people and as the story develops. And I think I'm probably, one of my strong points is I'm a very sociable person. You know, I kind of love people. I love characters. And I think that's for me what brings me back to TV series and brings me back to the books that I like the most, is the characters that you invest in. You know, you don't really invest in the plot. You know, I don't invest in the plot. The plot will almost maybe turn the page and bring me to the next page and bring me to the next chapter. But the characters is what will bring me back to the series of books, or will bring me back to that writer, because I'll kind of go, that's what I suppose the heart of it is. And I think it comes down to sort of empathy. And I think it is really hard to do sometimes in long running continuing shows, you know, and most of my work to date has been on that kind of long running or continuing shows, or shows that already have a kind of an IP, so to speak. So I'm kind of I would love to try and develop my own series, or get into work where it's original and you can start that from scratch, because it's hard sometimes as a director on a show like, I mean, let's just talk about Bulletproof, but on shows like Casualty 2, you're just a director for hire, you know. So you come in and the characters know their characters better than I know them, you know. So they know, they've been in their characters 10, 15 years sometimes. And so for a director to come in and talk about their character and tell them what their character should do can sometimes be a no-no. What I always kind of say is that I tend to know the scripts better than they know them. And if they know their characters, and then somehow together there's some sort of symbiosis that happens. So yeah, I think if character leaps off the page, or at least if it's not on the page, I try to put it on the screen if I can.
With the writing process, or I guess with your shows, when authors try to write a book, they tend to have a character arc throughout the show, maybe go up and throughout the story. It goes up and down maybe a couple of times, but in a show, I'm guessing you need that arc for each character sort of every episode, or do you try to like pan that out for a long process throughout the season?
It depends, I think. You know, it depends on you tend to, I mean, it's I suppose the lead characters, like Bulletproof's a good example, you know, where you kind of have the lead, the Pike and Bishop characters are pretty much worked out in terms of where their storyline will go, where their arc will be, where it starts, where it turns for them, and where it gets better again or whatever. That's probably mapped out pretty strongly. But then the lesser characters less so, you know, so it's like there's less backstory for them. And that's I suppose I spend quite a lot of time in my prep process trying to give them a backstory, even if it's completely made up, like even if it's, you know, it's got no reference to the because it just gives it another life, you know, to be able to go in. Like for instance, one of the things with Tanner, the police, the head of the police in Bulletproof, there's a whole backstory with her father that we kind of touched upon in the first couple of episodes, and there was slightly more of it in the actual series, but it kind of got cut because of plot, because of what I spoke about a second ago. But there was this whole kind of backstory about her father and how her father was had Alzheimer's and was in a home, and she was under pressure for money to kind of pay for his care, and there was this whole other world, I suppose, that, you know, for me is actually the most exciting part. It's a bit like right now the three of us are connected on Anchor doing a podcast, but there's so much else going on in our lives that's way more important than this. Even though this is what you're focused on right now, there's something else that you're thinking about, and that I'm thinking about that's way more important in life. And that's, for me, what drives character. That's what makes it much more exciting. So trying to find that, even sometimes if you make it up, is what makes great character. And it's what, as a director, actors will love, because you will be able to give them a note about something that's not on the page. And it means that they will then play the scene thinking about that kind of present need that they have. And it infers how they say their dialogue, and it just gives something more interesting. That's when you look at characters or actors and you kind of go, God, his performance was amazing. Like, what was he thinking about right there? Because we all talk about things and we talk about them now, but there's something that's driving what we're talking about, if that makes sense. I probably haven't really answered your question very well, Chris, but that's...
No, you've answered that perfectly. It's obviously a complex process that we don't have much insight to, which is why it's great to have people like yourself on. In terms of the writing, I'm not sure how much knowledge you have of Noel and Ashley's writing side of it, but they're obviously very busy filming with yourself as well. But do they write sort of on a weekly basis for the show, or is it sort of done pre-recording?
So the episode, obviously there was 8 episodes made. The show probably was commissioned the guts of a year before we started filming. So we started filming this series in March of last year. And so the series was probably commissioned probably a year previous to that. So in that time, they would have got into writers' rooms so Nick Love was the creator, along with Ash and Noel, and they would have been in a writer's room with Nick, Ash, Noel, a script editor, and there was 2 or 3 other kind of writers that they got in. So there was probably about 7 or 8 people in that writer's room, and they would have kind of broken down stories. So they would have, pretty much started off with, okay, they generally start off with kind of, let's do a kind of a shell of 8 episodes, but let's write a synopsis for each episode where we think we want it to go. And then they go into each episode and start to kind of break that down into kind of scene by scene, what it'll look like. And then they'll go into that and start taking the characters and look at the arcs of the characters. And they'll do that for each of the episodes, each of the characters within each of the episodes. So they would have started that process about a year out. Noel wrote episode 3, which I directed, which was the Amsterdam episode. And he probably did about, I'd say, 5 or 6 drafts on it. Like full drafts, and then it did like countless amount of revisions and amendments on it. So they would have been involved. Like Noel on episode 3 was kind of pretty much doing some amendments when we were shooting. There was times when he'd have a break on set and he'd go into his trailer and like rewrite a scene that we were going to shoot the next day. And so it's constant until it's not necessarily weekly. They're working on it for quite a long time, but the back is broken on the big amount of work, if you like. They've got a concrete draft written pretty early. And then it's just a case of trying to finesse it. Obviously, executive producers and producers have notes. Then obviously when I get attached as a director, then I have notes, and then they have to address all them notes, and we address them notes together. So it's probably a process that lasts for about a year and a half for them.
That's really interesting.
It is very interesting. You've touched on a little tiny bit about what your dream sort of project would be, because you've kind of talked about, obviously, your love for narration, your love for it being quite cinematic. But what are you hoping to get involved with in the future in terms of what would be the sort of ideal job for you?
I think I think as a director, your dream is to try and maybe either develop my own idea into a series, or take an idea that with a writer that a story or concept that I particularly love, and that you get involved in that at that stage I kind of spoke about, which is the kind of catalyst, the very, very beginning of that idea, and then taking that idea and forming it into a 6 or 8 or 10 part series, and being involved in that process from the very, very get-go. Sometimes, like, it depends as a director. On Bulletproof, I had like I think about an 18-week contract. So I got involved I was hired in the November before we shot in the March. And so I had like a 15-16 week prep period. So the scripts were kind of, when I got on board, there were episodes written. I'd love to get involved in a show where there's nothing, you basically start with that blank canvas. and there's like that smeg of an idea that someone goes, there's like a character or a thought process, getting involved in that, and then kind of taking that from the very, very beginning to its completion, and directing, I suppose, every aspect of that, directing the story and the idea of the story, but then getting, as a director, you're involved in the casting process, obviously. So, but getting involved in a show where it's nothing really would be what my dream is, and I suppose a show that kind of screams to me at the minute is like something like Succession, which is a show that I really, really love. And I think it's like, a show like Succession would be something I would love to make, is because it's purely character, really, it's like, it's all about character and characters' flaws and ambitions, and it drives me. So I suppose that is kind of what my dream job is. And that's, I think, most directors' dream job is having a show that's a nothing and becomes, a huge commercial success. But I love what I do. So if, depending on what comes along, if I'm asked to do a second series of a show that I really, really love, I'll do it. And I'm pretty early in my career as well, so it's like I'm learning all the time and trying to better yourself. There's a strange thing. I don't know if it's so much a thing in writing as it is in directing, but you can kind of get pigeonholed in directing when you become that guy, and so you become the cop show guy, or you become the action guy, and people want to put you in that kind of pedestal where that's the only thing you can be. So that's something that I need to be very careful about, how I negotiate and navigate that path in my career moving forward, because you don't want to become, the hacker, the guy that just does that. So my next job and what I choose to do is really important, because I'm a storyteller. I like to see myself as a storyteller. I can tell stories, and I'm not restricted to what genre that is or how that falls. But within this industry, you can sometimes be put into that box. You need to be a little bit careful about how you shape that.
That's quite a similar journey for the actors as well, from what I know, especially if someone's in a long-term series. Like you said, some series, they last for years, decades at times, and they get categorized into what characters they can play. So it must be tricky to show the world what you've got on offer when you just, as you said, been pigeonholed there.
Yeah, it's funny, It's like, I suppose I have an agent who kind of helps me a little bit in that regard, in terms of what, it's in America, they have managers, I know the American kind of system, they've got managers who pretty much just manage what you do, and they look at how to kind of manage that. Agents offer work differently in that regard. But my agent is really good at maybe helping me, and maybe I steer her. It's something I think a lot about, and I try to kind of go, well, how do I not, take a wrong step, so to speak. But it's tricky, because you have to work, so there's the financial side of, I have to work, and you have to earn money. But then there's also that kind of creative aesthetic side, where you got to do the right kind of work. And I suppose the other thing is, like, it's a bit like writing, when you direct, the more you direct, the more you write, the better you become, like you have to be writing. And for me, directing is, and like, you have to be directing actors and directing shows to learn that. I think writing differs in one way, in that you can do it solitary in your own room, and you can get better at doing that. And yeah, okay, there's a question of being published, not being published, whatever, but at least you can write, and you can show it to your friends, and you can show it to a publisher, and you can get notes, and you can make it better. Directing's harder in that regard. You can't necessarily direct a short in your front room and, hope for you. I suppose you can get better at that, but I find the bigger shows you do are that the more you learn, and the more you're getting to make stuff, and the more you're getting in that shop window, which is fundamentally what you want to be too, So it's a really tricky one, It's an aspect that, it's kind of part of it that I kind of hate, but I kind of love. It's like a kind of pleasure pain kind of thing, because it's like, just you kind of just wish it was as easy as just getting a job and working on that job. Within the industry, if you work on casualty, let's say, for too long, you get boxed into being a casualty director. And I know lots of really, really good directors who can't break out of casualty land because they're just seen as being a casualty director, and they're kind of, and it's like, that's not right, but that's kind of what happens. So it's tricky, It's a really tricky So as soon as, when I got directing Casualty a couple of years ago, like my mother thought it was the best thing ever. She was like ringing all her friends saying, he's directing Casualty, he's made it. He's got. And I was really proud of it. But after 3 episodes, I was like, I'm gone, I'm moving on. And like to my parents, it was like, you what? Like, you've got a job working on a BBC show. How do you mean you're moving on? You're like, yeah, I've got to move on. And so it's kind of alien to people to understand that concept, because I get it from people all the time. They're like, oh, he's not working. He's not taking, he turned down this job because like he doesn't want to do that because he's going to be seen in the wrong light. I mean, that's nuts, And to kind of, I'll say the word normal people, but the people outside of the industry, you don't get the creative process. That is a really crazy thought, like, isn't it? It's like that you don't work because it might not be the right job for you. That notion is kind of mad.
Has there ever been a time, obviously I don't want you to dog people out or anything, but where your ambition and what you were trying to do has not been able to come across because of the actors or the finances have not been in place for you to be able to sort of pursue your storytelling idea for that show? And how frustrating is that?
All the time.
How do you get around that?
All the time. It's a funny business, there are lots of in TV, there are lots of producers, there are lots of executive producers, and everyone is allowed to have a say or have a set of notes on what they feel and what they think it should be, and as the director you become another voice in that, a pretty main voice in that, and so you have to be, I suppose you learn to get quite dogged and quite cutthroat. And I think probably the battle is learning pretty early on that you're not going to win every single battle. You're not going to, so that you kind of choose which battle you think is the right battle to fight, and that you win, X amount of them, and another few that you just won't win. I mean, sometimes it comes down to casting. On casting, I had a couple of ideas that I won on, if you like, that I got my say and it went with, and some ones that didn't really go exactly as I wanted to go. And that's kind of the nature of it. It's that's just the way it is. You kind of just have to kind of live up to that. And I suppose you just have to fight it. I mean, I always kind of say you fight it and you fight it and you fight it, and you got to prove that it's the right idea. And sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. Most of the time, everybody just wants to make the best show possible. And so if they see your vision and your vision is clear and they know why you're trying to do it, they'll kind of go with it. But there are times where it can be really, really frustrating, and it's kind of the nature of the beast, really. It's like it happens. Like I always used to say, it's like, oh, it's because I'm working on Casualty, and then I move up to Silent Witness, and it's similar happens in Silent Witness, and then I move up to Bulletproof, and the same happens in that. And I've got friends who are doing, working on something in Hollywood at the minute, and I was talking to them last week, and the same thing's happening to them now in Hollywood. Like, there's like, they're potentially doing a big movie for Hollywood, and it's the same thing. Like, they're like, it doesn't get any better. It gets harder, actually, because the more money that you're given, the more people have a say, and the more people that actually want to make sure that you're not messing up, what the show that you've been given, so it's just the nature of the beast, and it's about how you deal with it, really, and it's about fighting your battles, I suppose.
There's a little bit in season 2 of Bulletproof that I laughed out loud to, and I want to know whose idea was this, and it was probably Ashley's himself. But there's a moment when he's sat in the car while Noel goes into the police safe holding, and he's singing 21 Seconds to himself in the car. Was that his own input into the show?
Yeah, I remember it quite well, actually. It's because it's funny because it's them scenes are written, so on the script, it's written in interior the heist, and it's intercut, so you've got the interior of the heist going on, exterior Ash in the car, and exterior the rest of the gang in the tent up the road, and it's intercut, so it says like in the heist, Noel does this, Ash in the car. And, generally when they're written, a lot of the time they tend to be kind of underwritten, as I say, which is a good thing. Don't get me wrong. It's like that. It's like, it's never really prescribed. It says Ash sits in the car, he's waiting. And then the next one, it'll say Ash sits in the car, he's still waiting. And then the third time it'll say Ash is in the car, my God, he's bored, or whatever, and they're the three. And, so it kind of really leaves it open-ended to what the hell you can do as a director there. And I remember it was like, generally with these things as well, we shot, that sequence was a really, really tough sequence to shoot. The lighting took a long time for us to achieve. We wanted this kind of low-key, moody lighting with this kind of red, ambient, kind of strong light. It took a huge amount of time for it to complete it. And I remember like that we really struggled to finish that night, to film that night. And one of the last things we had to do was this simple, really simple, scene with Ash in the car, which is like Ash waiting, he's waiting, and the phone rings and he runs out or something, And like on the page, and to all the producers, it's like this kind of thing that you can do in 5 minutes, and they tend to be really, really quick. But me being me and trying to add something, you're always just trying to go, well, what else can it be? And so I remember just kind of saying to Ash, look, it's kind of really simple, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to just cue you every like 30 seconds, and I'm just going to shout something into the car that will cue, something for you to do something, So like quite literally, I'd kind of say, dude, you're bored. And then I'd say, you're really fucking bored, like you're so bloody bored now, And then I'd say, actually, you know what? You're going insane, And like, I'd shout something just at him, And he'd go from like, I remember he sat there, then he twiddled his thumbs, then he tapped the kind of steering wheel. And he actually at one point put his head down and kind of pretended he was asleep and kind of started smacking his head off the steering wheel. And then he just sat back and he started singing. And it was just like, you kind of know when it happened, you're like, that's gold, it's complete gold. And actually with the guys, both of them, when they work, the way they work is phenomenal, because they are actually off screen great friends, really, really great friends. And they get in the room with the script. And generally, the first time we look at the script, we rehearse the scene, they'll read the script. And the second time they kind of do it, you can see the script slowly start to disappear. And this whole new kind of scene takes place where they're just ad-libbing basically the scene, but in their own kind of way, and it just becomes this kind of magical transition where it just starts to happen, where it just becomes funnier and it becomes more real and more authentic. And it's basically just the two of them being them. And the one thing as a director you have to do is to kind of just curtail it, because if you let it go, they'd go for like 10 hours. They just keep going and going and going and going. And so your main job really is kind of giving them enough kind of ammunition to go and do what they do. And then just kind of say to them, okay, guys, stop now, or it's too much. Or sometimes they get so caught up in the kind of humorous, funny side of it, they lose a little bit of the plot. And you kind of have to go in and sometimes just remind them, listen, remember that we have to mention this bit about, the drugs part, or just some sort of plot thing. You're not mentioning that at all. It's hilarious and it's brilliant, but the plot makes no sense. And they're like, oh yeah, fair enough. And they'll put it back in,
So for an initial project, for someone to approach you, like, what is it that hooks you in? Is it the script that you're initially given? Is it the people that you're possibly working with? Is it the vision that they have for the show?
I think it can be anything and everything, really. Most of the time, it's the idea. Really, it's the idea. It's the notion of the script. It's the synopsis. It's the original material, the source material it's based on. And generally, it's the story. It's really the story that brings you in, or a character within that story that you kind of go, God, I love this character. The people obviously help. If they're really good people and they're nice people, it means you want to work with them. That helps. But if it's really, really nice people with a terrible script, you're not going to do it. So I think it's really always comes down to the writing and what the actual story is. And do I find, I suppose for me, it tends to be a heart. I'm driven by heart. I just love actual emotion. I kind of go, well, what is it that will kind of bring me back for more, or what is it that I'll connect with this person? That's what does it for me all the time, really. And I think that's like a lot of what I was trying to be sold on Bulletproof initially. When the producers got me in, they were like, it's a pretty big budget. We're going to go to Amsterdam. We're going to be racing cars around Amsterdam. And I was like, okay, that is pretty cool. Don't get me wrong. But like, I want something more than that, And it's like, it was the guys. It was really the guys and that banter that I went, that was for so special for me, I was like, and it's that I think people come back more for, It's like, really, if you look at the reaction on social media, it's generally the comedy stuff that people kind of harp on about. And 90% of the messages are, it's Pike and Bish, Pike and Bish, Pike and Bish. No one goes, what an amazing stunt sequence. And most people don't go, I love the cinematography in it. But that's a good thing, because my job is not to draw your eye to the cinematography. My job is to tell the story. If I tell it beautifully, then great. And people like you and critics and people who are into it will see that and notice that and appreciate that. But if that's the thing that people are taking from it the most, I've actually failed in my job. If people are going, my God, London looked amazing, and you're like, whoa, hold on. So for me, Bulletproof, like I said, is the magic of them guys. So yeah.
All right, Dermot. A couple of questions. We talked about this on our show earlier. Top 3 favorite films.
Oh,
It's a tough one, I know, but come on, let's have them.
Oh gosh, top 3. I mean, I'm gonna go. Okay, I was kind of. I still love the kind of oldies. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
To still for me the original taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3.
Wow.
Which is, I absolutely love that film. I think it's a fantastic film. There's another oldie which neither you might have seen this film. If you have, you're going to really impress me. Actually, it's a film called Capricorn 1.
I have not seen that film.
Okay. There's a movie. Here's your homework for next week, guys. Right? There's a movie called Capricorn 1, which is it's kind of about the moon landings, but it's set on Mars. It's about how the kind of moon landings were faked, if you like. But it's a story of heart. It's a story about the astronauts that go there. It was made in 1978. Stars James Brolin, Elliot Gould, O.J. Simpson actually has a part in it, believe it or not. But it's directed by a guy called Peter Hyams. But it's a classic kind of thriller from the 70s that is, I'm not doing it justice. It's amazing. It's a really, really strong film and worth a look. I'll put that there. And then third one is probably just kind of like really downbeat, horribly bad, like horrible kind of subject matter. But I'm a huge fan of Schindler's List.
Wow. Yeah, great film.
So, but you know what? You asked me this question tomorrow. I picked 3 different films. But...
Yeah, so essentially you could make any character or any storyline your own. So like, say, for example, Harry Potter, you could have a crack at that. And they'd say, right, here's the series, you can do it. Here's the film, you can do it.
That's a tough one as well, isn't it? Wow.
So while we're on the topic of like other people's films and other people's work, if you could pick anybody's project up and make it your own and have a run at it for a series or for maybe a sequel or a prequel, what would be your source that you would go to?
Ask me that one again. So like, is this a pre-existing thing? I tell you what I loved. I always think it was brilliant. So I'm torn between 2 things now. I'm going to mention 2 things. The 2 are like The Sopranos. So giving a crack at Sopranos and Tony's character. And the other one would be the ITV series Cracker with Robbie Coltrane from years ago, which I'll go with. If I could have a go at either of them, I'd be pretty happy in life.
Yeah. What out of interest would you try and do with those characters that are a bit different, or would you stick with the same sort of character that we know but try and explore?
Good one. Yeah, I always kind of it's funny because like for me, when Sopranos really, 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 really worked, what I loved about it was the whole family side of it. When it's like, and so there's that episode which I think was called College, which was like my favorite episode, whereas he brings Meadow to university. So Tony brings Meadow, his daughter, to university, and it's like he gets shown around the campus kind of thing, and he meets like an old badass dude that has he has a gripe with there, and I always loved Sopranos when it worked at that, like Tony is this mafia mob leader, badass, like really bad bastard when he wanted to be, but he was just a dad, like he was this dad to these like 2 kids and this wife, as in like, and he had to deal with that. He had to deal with the shit that goes along with that. And I think for me, Sopranos really worked when it did that. And it did it a lot of the time, but there was times maybe where it focused maybe a little bit too much on the kind of mob side of it, where there's times where it got into, but when you do, I don't know, 8 series or whatever the hell, 8 series of it, you got to go somewhere else. But for me, the simplicity of that is what I liked. I just love the idea that this guy, it's a bit Breaking Bad too, you know, where you just got this kind of science teacher who, you know, has his everyday banal life, but gets involved in something that's like, you know, crazy and nuts. But and how the kind of how them worlds contrasts, and how you go from him cooking meth in the back of a truck and dealing with the biggest gangsters that are around, to then him having to deal with his son and the difficulties his son has, and even just going to attend, you know, a cancer outpatient. You know, that I find that fascinating. That for me is kind of drama, you know, and it's in some ways it's kind of, it's the everyday, and then it's the magical, I suppose. It's the escapism. And it's, in some ways, it's like the everyday meets the escapism, which is what makes cinema great for me, is that notion that you got this character that could be you or could be me, you know, in some shape or form, but they kind of exist in a different place.
Absolutely, that's a great answer, and I've always said the same about the book side of it. It's the escapism and the story that drags me into their world the deepest is what really gets my attention. So I love that aspect of it as well.
Mad thing about it, I suppose, as well, for what I've kind of been, you know, what I talk about is there's TV, in particular, has become huge, you know, and so there's a massive urge now and a massive need for content, you know. So for writers and people within the community that you guys are kind of working with, you know, there's like people want content now, you know, and so they're seeking out ideas like they've never been sought out before. So it's a kind of a magical time for that. And it's like, I find that quite interesting. You know, I love that. And that's why I kind of, I suppose, connected with you guys in the first place. And I look at that stuff. I'm fascinated by people and stories they're trying to tell, and look outside of kind of, you know, their perceived notions of where stories come from, if you like. So it's cool to look at. And I think that's what's really exciting about the future for you guys and for all your kind of supporters or fans or guys that follow you, is that, you know, it's a golden era for content, and there's no reason why you can't be the next, you know, big success story.
Well, send them my way. We're waiting.
Yeah. On that, what do you think the future looks like in terms of the industry? Because obviously the shows that we're having on TV now, and like nothing that we've ever seen before, really, and you've got some shows that are being repeated and stuff, but the idea of an original idea, an original thought is getting bigger and bigger. And also the shows like Game of Thrones and stuff are just taking our idea of what a TV show can be to the next level. So what do you see happening?
It's hard to know. I mean, the whole original idea thing, you know, I mean, I think that's, I don't know if that exists anymore, because I don't, is there an original idea? I mean, you know, I don't open that can of worms, because how long do we have to talk? But, you know, I mean, I don't know if there's ever an original idea. For me, it's an idea that's kind of dressed up differently, you know, as in if you kind of break down, I mean, people kind of go, The Godfather, great movie, Succession, and there's huge similarities between The Godfather and Succession, you know, and people are going to go, such an original idea. And it is in many shapes or form. But like The Godfather and Succession, there's real similarities between them stories, you know, and certain characters within them stories. And it's just dressed up slightly differently. So I think that's kind of the magic, is finding a story that, you know, is not original, but you make it feel original in the way that you direct it, in the way that you write it, in the kind of, maybe the point of view that it comes from, you know. Sometimes that's where the kind of magic, the magic touch is that, you know, it's taking a story that we've seen a million times, but looking at it from a different character's perspective, looking at it from the victim's point of view, looking at it from the attacker's point of view, whatever, you know. And that's sometimes what makes the original idea. Where it's going, I mean, it's funny because I don't know if you guys have heard this thing, Quibi, you know, this there's a new platform called Quibi that's financed by Jeffrey Katzenberg, who's like a huge Hollywood exec. He used to be involved with DreamWorks, SKG, they're one of the big Hollywood studios. But it's basically like 6 to 10 minutes. So each episode is 6 or 10 minutes long. So it's 10 minutes by 6, if you like. So it's kind of really driven to watch stuff on your phone, you know, so you kind of, but they've spent like millions, like, so a 6-part series that is 6 episodes of 10 minutes duration, they were spending like, you know, the same amount of money per episode that they'd spend on a 50-minute. So they're spending like millions of pounds, and Steven Spielberg has made one for them. Guillermo del Toro has made stuff for them. anyway, the reason I say it is I thought that maybe that's where the future lay in some ways, and it kicked off. I think Quibi opened about 3 or 4 weeks ago, or maybe only 2 weeks ago, but it hasn't got a great reaction at the minute. There's a lot of kind of negative feedback about it. So I wonder if the future was actually in short form content, if that the notion that we now watch so much content on our phones as we on the tube, as we on the train, as we travel, that might be where the future is. But I don't know if that's now where the future is. I still think there's a cinema at the minute is taking a bit of a battering in that I think people are more interested in that longer form thing still. The notion, certainly filmmakers are, the notion that you can take a character and make that arc 10 episodes long, multiplied by 6 series. That is really intriguing for filmmakers, for writers, and I think it still is for an audience. So I still think there's a bit of living in that. I think that will kind of go on for long. I think cinema will resurge. I think that will it could really resurge at the end of this whole lockdown thing, because people will be so mad to get out of their bloody houses and just go somewhere. That I think cinema will come back, like cinema as we know it. I think will come back again. I think that will kind of burst back out again in some shape or form in a couple of years. And I think, like everything, it just becomes a cyclical thing. I think we just go through these periods where you think it's new, but it's not really new. It's just it's just new at that time, or it's just a take on something that already existed. So I don't really know where it'll go. I think there's still a long-term time for us to go in this. The period that we're in at the minute. I think people are still crazy for content. There's a couple of years left in that, I think, where people will still want to make stuff. So I hope that just to keep doing that for a couple of years and see where we go. But I don't know. And I suppose the question is, if I really knew where it was going, I wouldn't tell you, because I want to be a billionaire.
Yeah. So do you think as well, with like a lot of these like nostalgia shows, in terms of like Stranger Things, throwbacks and ideas to the 80s, and obviously like all the Star Wars stuff, that the Star Wars films, when they came out, they were trying to hint at things that people could relate to and knew and love already. Like, can you see, like, I don't know, maybe Westerns coming back into play? Or,
yeah, maybe.
That
yeah,
sort of
I think there's 2 reasons. I think people, we've all, as people, we're kind of really easy, the whole human race thing, we're kind of easy to kind of break down, and you think, when you travel the world, you'll always find an Irish pub. Why is that? Like, why do we travel the world and find an Irish pub? Because people just kind of find comfort in that. They find comfort in it's why Subway and McDonald's are all over the world. People find comfort in the kind of the home comfort, so to speak. And I think TV is the same thing. You kind of, for me, Jurassic Park and the whole kind of remaking of the original film 10 years later was kind of a real spark of that. It was like the original Steven Spielberg Jurassic Park was a huge movie, and I remember it kind of being quite seminal in my life in some ways, and then that Jurassic World was pretty much a remake of that film for the kind of new generation of kids, and it was like, I thought that was quite mad in a way, but like I kind of understood it, and it's like, I don't know if you can ever relive the same thing twice, if that makes sense. Like, it was big but it didn't have the same splash. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, I think the main reason behind that is kind of financiers. I don't think it really comes from anywhere else other than the kind of moneyed people. And I don't mean that in any negative way. I just mean it's like, when these people put so much money into something, they need a return these days. And the return comes from the fact that people, I suppose, Hollywood are casting sometimes from Twitter now, or from Instagram. They're putting the guy in the lead role who's got like 10 million followers, because they know that, well, there's 10 million tickets, and that might sound cynical, but there's a certain truth to that, and that, like, there's a little bit of the risk aversion thing has gone a little bit, and the old kind of Hollywood took bigger risks in what they chose to make, and what films they chose to tell, and what stories they chose to tell. And it's what probably attracted us. There is less risk being taken now, and I find that less interesting for me as a cinema goer, because I'm like, I want to see risk. I'm more interested, and that doesn't just mean indie movies, but the indie films are probably what are exciting me now. Because they're telling stories that are more intriguing to me. And I'm less excited by the MCU world. Just because that's just doesn't excite me anymore. and that comes from financing really, because it's like, if you were a money guy, if you're investing in something, you want to know you're going to get a return. And I guarantee you that MCU will get a return. I can't guarantee you that my next film or my first feature film will make you money. And that's kind of the way it is. And I think that will change again. People will start taking risks again. But just at the minute, that's kind of what's happened, and we're kind of stuck in a little bit of a rut there.
Okay, guys, that's the end of this week's interview with Diarmuid. It has been fantastic having you on. Absolutely loved it. And thank you from the Writing Community Chat Show. We love to speak to you again soon, and stay safe.
Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. And I really love everything you're doing on Twitter and in the world and all your writing. So keep it going, and let's keep helping each other.
Awesome. Thanks, Diarmuid.
Take care, boys.
All units respond. Proceed with caution.
Put your hands in the air.
Suspect is in custody.
Oh, man!
I'ma wake up, do damage. Join them 7-6 boredom. Working on nothing more though. I'ma wake up, do damage. Join them 7-6 boredom. Working on nothing more though. You feel drippy, I can feel it out. Hop in my car and get it out. Secure the back, I get the buzz. Pick it up, pick it up, pick it up. Ooh, I've been on the flex since flex on. Neighborhood all in your eardrums. I ain't never scared like Bone Crush. Boy, I got God, don't fear none. My love is take no calls. Feels like I don't have no flaws. Snakes in the grass, cut those off. Your whole squad shitty, make bros raw. No breaks, we go, 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 go. Go shade, that's a no, no, no. Go high, go low, low, low. Like spinning in a 644.